In a previous video, there was a comparison between the later version of the dual 360 strobe responder and the Guardian with the same internal options. It was noted that the lack of a fluted dome on the Guardian may have contributed to it being, in my opinion, not as effective, even though its footprint was significantly larger than the later generation responder made at the same time. So with this video, I'm going to compare a couple things between slightly older generation responder bars, the fluted dome and the non-fluted dome. The previous version, even to this, did not have fluted domes. The internal optics were fluted, but the external dome was a standard responder dome. That changed with the value bar, except in rare custom cases, and the responder dual 360 strobe version that came out a little bit later in the late 90s. They almost always had a fluted dome. Sometimes they did not, maybe a custom build or a switch out. So the other question would be, why do these seemingly halogen light bars with two strobes in place of the rotators even exist at all? It is a pretty common design amongst multiple manufacturers. Whelen was obviously no exception. They had several different versions of putting 360-degree strobes in what was previously a rotator bar with various results like we're showing here. Responder and Guardian both did that. So aren't there better strobe light bar designs? And haven't they been around for a really long time? Why would anybody do this even as late in the game as they were doing it? The earlier strobe bars, some of the first strobe bars were a 360 strobe beacon just in an enclosed crossbar, as they called it. And the Strobe Hawk kept this up even longer than the 8000 series previously pictured. There was nothing wrong with that particular idea. It was just very bulky, and you generally only got two end strobes and required the use of mirrors usually to get a consistent flash across the bar, and they really were just enclosed crossbars, two beacons enclosed. But a pretty decent amount of time before the responders we're talking about came out, various versions of the Edge, the mini Edge specifically, were introduced. And the I-beam design with the directional nature strobes proved very, very effective to the point that it was copied for years and then became the footprint for the LED line later. It proved extremely effective, low profile, and a much better use of real estate with the ability to get many more options in them in a much smaller size. You can take a look at the internal options that were offered at the corner of edge bars, and therefore as the main strobes on a mini edge bar, and they were very much designed to do what they do, and they do it very, very well. Much better than a 360-degree strobe beacon underneath one big dome. It is a major development for the strobe bar industry, and they had options from the beginning, but they were not cheap. They had 4 strobes instead of 2 to get the same coverage, so a 360 style strobe bar could be half the price. Half the strobes, half the price. And that, I think, is the reason why these were offered. They were advertised with a similar flash pattern and similar wattage rating, but you got a much smaller price tag for a variety of reasons, but mainly just that you could do it with existing beacons and a lot less total bulbs. So even the relamping could be significantly cheaper. And many companies made these, and most of them just put their existing beacons under an existing mini bar dome, and that proved very, very effective. And some still do it with LEDs. There are some LED options like this, and that proved effective for a long time. So that's where these came from. So while Whelen did use the fluted dome for most of the 360-degree strobe versions, there were some that didn't. But really, was it that much of an improvement to justify manufacturing a separate dome? At that point, why even stick with the odd design? I think you could argue that it's a relatively small change to put the fluting within the dome, and I think it makes a pretty significant difference. Putting these bars side by side, and this is a red bar that did come with this dome, and I'm not sure if it was ordered that way, or if it was an accident or it was put on later. I don't know. This one, however, I just made for this demo to show a variety of different setups and colors. And I think across both colors and both setups, the fluted dome did significantly better, especially at off angles and distances, at filling the whole bar, whereas the non-fluted domes tended to just look like two beacons next to each other, and the dome maybe is only worth a dust cover. So let's just say that the fluted dome was clearly better. That could be up for debate, but let's just say it was. Bear with me, and we'll just say the fluted dome looks a lot better. I thought it did in person, but you may not be able to tell that from the video. But for the sake of the next argument, let's just say that the fluted dome is superior and was worth producing for this light bar. The Guardian has a non-fluted dome, but there's a mirror in the middle, which the earlier responder didn't have, and the later responder actually shown here did have. Does that make a difference? Does that make up for the lack of the fluted dome? The Guardian was a little bit less noticeable, but nowhere near as poor as a responder lacking the fluted dome. So is the lack of a mirror a problem to the point where the fluted dome negates it? Where exactly do we come in there? So I just added a mirror to the fluted dome version of the responder. And I thought we would compare that and see if maybe we could get the best of both worlds, if you will, out of our older responder that came with the fluted dome but did not come with a mirror between the beacons. Maybe turn it into a little bit more proper mini light bar and get performance out of it that makes it more than just two beacons. I think this shows up in the video. In person, I will say that the mirror made a huge difference. I think more than the fluted dome. The fluted dome is better than the non-fluted. Absolutely it is. But the mirror was a huge upgrade in person. And the two colors actually stayed separated based on where the mirror was too. I can't believe they didn't add a mirror until the later version of the Responder 360 style strobe bar. It's so simple, so cheap, and so much less trouble than making a fluted dome. I didn't run a test with a mirror and a non-fluted dome. I'm just going to say that it would be very similar to the Guardian with the non-fluted dome in the mirror. And that's where I think these bars are interesting. They had the fluted dome. They did not have the mirror. It would just seem to me that the fluted dome is such a big thing comparatively to put together versus just adding a mirror to a non-fluted dome version of this bar. I'm not 100% sure if at the time there was a specific reason. The previous generation of the responder bar with the dual strobes actually did have a mirror in it. However, that one used self-contained strobe beacons, which were not great, and so there was a place for a mirror. This responder version has a pretty big power supply. It's a full-sized strobe power supply. It is a two-head value product strobe power supply, and it does take up some real estate, almost half the height of the dome and a third of the width. So I can see maybe why they just decided the mirror wasn't really feasible, but clearly it is. So I would have preferred the mirror to the fluting, I think. So let's see some video just on its own, not next to each other, of the base factory model fluted dome, no mirror. it's not a bad light bar. And like I have mentioned, the fluted nature of the dome does make up a little bit for the fact that it's just two beacons spread like 8 inches apart with nothing else. I don't think it's ineffective. Again, the video doesn't always do them justice. It gets a little washed out, but I think you can tell this is a relatively effective bar for what it is. Got some slow motion here of the fluted dome bar with mirrors added. I think in some of these particular clips, the 1/4 speed first and the 1/8 speed second, the mirror makes a much more obvious difference. It's a lot closer to what I was seeing in person than the full speed video. I just think it fills the bar better, and I've talked previously about sometimes the 360 strobe style bars just being their parts and no better than if you were to stick two beacons on a tray and not cover them. I think the mirror really makes that not the case. I mean, it's more than the sum of its parts. It's actually a cohesive unit with a mirror in there. And I think the fluted dome with the mirror makes it both better than the non-fluted dome with the mirror and better than the fluted dome without the mirror. I think it's the combination of those two options, one of which was never an actual option, that really makes this a viable light bar. I'm curious if maybe Whelen agreed when they went to the Guardian, which essentially replaced the responder, because they did not bother to make a fluted version of its dome, but they did stick a mirror in there. So it would seem that they took a lesson from other manufacturers that make similar bars and went with the mirror versus the custom or specific to model dome, which would make sense to me. I think in slow motion, the lacking mirror version of the bar with the fluted dome, it comes across pretty well. It does show you that you can see some flash inward of the strobes within the bar. At an off angle, maybe it's a little bit helpful too. I do think this does display how the mirror is better, but I think it also shows that there was some level of the fluting being a worthwhile addition. The actual strobes themselves in this are not quite as big as the strobes in the later version and in the Guardian. Originally, I thought maybe the footprint of the internal strobes made a bigger difference, but taking the exterior dome off of the later version, it really wasn't a whole lot of difference with the domes off and a slightly bigger footprint strobe. So again, I was left with the conclusion that fluted dome is a good addition, mirror is a good addition, together is a pretty solid product. I would go as far as to say the only wrong answer would be a non-fluted dome and no mirror, in which case I'm willing to say that that is just two beacons with a dust cover. So a fluted dome with a mirror, like on the left here, appears to be the best all-around option. If I had to choose one, like I said, I would go with the mirror. Pretty much every other company that offered them went with a regular dome and a mirror versus a fluted dome and no mirror, or a fluted dome and a mirror. However, on the left there, the later responder with the mirror and the fluting is by far the best. And going back here, the non-fluted is, again, not great, and the fluted is acceptable. So fluted acceptable, mirror acceptable, fluted and mirror together, by far the best choice. I wish it would have been offered, but it's not hard to make. If you've tinkered with these, leave me a comment down below. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.